DirectX 12 is finally here, and I hope you're ready for some big advancements in the graphics of your PC games. Here's 10 things you need to know about DirectX 12.
Number 10, a drastic increase in the number of draw calls. Now, what's a draw call? Well, every single time a vertex, a line, or a face needs to be rendered, it has to send a draw call to the CPU. DirectX 12 is going to be making the work of a draw call less taxing on the CPU, and thusly allowing for more of them, making the CPU much less of a bottleneck. This is great because obviously you want to be able to put as much on screen as possible, and with DirectX 12, the amount goes up several 100%. Number 9, split frame rendering, which is a technology that allows your computer to render a segment of the screen, be it a half of the screen or a fourth of the screen, or really any fractional segment of the screen, depending on how many GPUs you have. Anyway, it allows the CPU to render just that segment of the screen with a specific GPU. So you can have half of the screen being rendered by one of your GPUs and the other half rendered by your other. And you might think, well, that's not that big of a deal, is it? Wrong. That literally halves or slices by a fourth the number of pixels that GPU has to bother with. And as long as everything stays in sync, which the API ensures does, the result is a much better way for multi-GPU gamers to achieve higher frame rates, and thusly better games. Number 8, DirectX 12 unfortunately will not make your existing games play better. In order for a game to take advantage of the DirectX 12 APIs, it needs to be optimized or programmed from the ground up for DirectX 12. Now, that doesn't mean your favorite games aren't going to offer a patch, but unless a game explicitly states that it was made for or adapted to DirectX 12, you should pretty much see performance on par with what you expect now, which is a good reason to email the people who make the games that you like and say, hey, you gonna support DirectX 12 in a patch or anything?
Number 7, threading is vastly improved. In a blog post about DirectX 12, Microsoft acknowledged
that DirectX 11 has some limitations in its API. For instance, multi-threading isn't that optimally done, whereas in DirectX 12, multi-threading has been completely revamped, and on top of that, DirectX now allows a CPU to use all of its cores to communicate with the graphics hardware. Previously, that was just completely impossible, and CPUs were using one core,
allowing for more graphical processes, meaning with the same amount of processing power, you're going to see better graphics. And if that theory holds when it's applied practically, the frame rates won't be changing at all. Number 6, decreased CPU usage. So, you know artificial intelligence uses up CPU, and so do physics and debris, because AI, physics, and debris all are very problem-based math. That stuff all has to be offloaded to the CPU typically. GPUs and CPUs are fundamentally different, a GPU being tailored for geometry and a CPU being tailored for basically every other kind of math. But with DirectX 12, they're decreasing the usage on that. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but CPU development has slowed a little bit, while GPU development has exploded. DirectX 12 is attempting to accommodate that by optimizing what is actually sent to the CPU before it's ever sent there. This means there's less CPU usage, and the CPU doesn't become a bottleneck for games with large amounts of, again, AI, physics, or debris.
Number 5, GPU brand mixing.
NVIDIA and AMD cards are fundamentally kind of different in some areas. It's currently not impossible to run games on multiple brands of graphics cards at once. It can be a task, though, basically dependent on if the engine was optimized to do this, whether it would run well on your computer. It's not impossible that it could work out just fine, but it wasn't a standard. You couldn't just naturally do this. However, the DirectX 12 APIs would make them work easier with multiple graphics cards from different brands. Essentially, the game should be able to have access to all the functions using the same set of commands as it interprets it for those cards in a manner that works out much closer to seamlessly, if not entirely so. Number 4, the requirements. DirectX 12 is Windows 10 only. So if you don't have Windows 10 and are looking forward to the advances in DirectX 12, in some cases you're probably going to have to upgrade your card as well. From NVIDIA, you're going to need a Kepler or Maxwell-based GPU. That's the 6, 7s, and 8s. But AMD is supporting DirectX 12 on all GCN class hardware going back to 2012's HD77 series. That includes includes the HD85 series and the Radeon R5s and anything above. All future cards from either manufacturer are going to support DirectX 12. Number 3, a short list of games that are going to take advantage of it immediately. The first official launch with DirectX 12 support was Ashes of the Singularity. Support has been added to Rise of the Tomb Raider, Hitman, and Gears of War Ultimate Edition launched with it. Just Cause 3 and Elder Scrolls Online are both in the process of getting DirectX 12, and upcoming games that will support it are Deus Ex Mankind Divided, Star Citizen, and Total War Warhammer. Number 2, DirectX 12 will streamline game development significantly. As I said a short while ago, DirectX 12 API is much leaner than DirectX 11, meaning it's a significantly more condensed API with less commands to call similar functions. What this means is whether a developer is using an engine that another developer created or is using a proprietary engine, as they need to call the graphics routines, there's a smaller set of commands necessary in order to do the same things. This obviously means there's some degree of less work just in that aspect, but on top of that, it does a much better balance of work distribution, which will necessitate less optimization later in the development process. The development pipeline should be significantly more straightforward as a game is being developed, and this should allow developers to focus more on the creative aspect of a game. Now, obviously, it doesn't just make game development easy, it's a skill that requires a lot of knowledge and training, whether it's self-training or instruction, but allowing game developers to be more creative with their time is never a bad thing. And finally, number 1, DirectX 12 has a competitor. AMD has been spending time developing an API called Vulcan, which is effectively the successor to OpenGL. Valve Software has officially backed Vulcan and call it the quote-unquote right way forward. Now, Valve is obviously a fairly significant company, and what they say has a pretty fair amount of bearing. But also remember, they're a company, and they probably have a horse in the race, monetarily speaking. That's not to say they're not correct, just at this point it's opinion, and there may be money involved in that opinion. Vulcan is going to support Windows 10, Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows 3.1. That's a joke, it doesn't. But believe it or not, you're actually going to be able to use Vulcan on Android, which implies a much greater flexibility than DirectX 12, while at the same time giving that simplified API access to all the hardware. Now, being this is AMD creating the technology though, there's a chance they're going to use it to attempt to push their own hardware. Because again, we're talking about a lot of moneyed interests here. We know a lot about Vulcan, and we know that people from Valve and people from AMD all say it's clearly the best choice, and people from Microsoft say that DirectX 12 is clearly the best choice. So really, we're kind of going to have to wait until both are released and we can competitively compare these two technologies and tell you which one actually works better. There's a lot of contention, and because Valve has gotten involved, which has a significant fan presence, and Microsoft, who owns the Xbox brand, also has a significant fan presence, you can bet this is going to be a subject of internet arguments to come, probably for the foreseeable future. Speaking of internet arguments, what do you think? Are you backing DirectX 12 or are you a Vulcan person? Which do you think is going to become the standard? Let's have a discussion about that in the comments. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please click the like button. It helps us immensely, and if you're not subscribed already, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every single day of the week, and the best way to see them first is a subscription. As always, we thank you so much for watching this video, and we will see you again next time right here on GameRanx.